Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pachanine Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paschati Satarine. Hare Krishna. So, Ram Navami is coming up, and so I thought, let's talk about Lord Ram. So you think that's a good idea? We talk about Lord Ram. Today in Alachua, it is Tuesday, April 9th, and we are celebrating Ram Navami on Saturday. So that means 10, 11, 12, Saturday the 13th. So I thought, let's discuss Ramayana, and that way we'll be more in the mood. Hare Krishna. We'll be more in the mood. We should meditate on Ram. We can meditate on Ram today, tomorrow, the next day, on his appearance day, after his appearance day. So, generally, as devotees, we don't focus on Lord Ram, but now is the time we focus on Lord Ram. So, the first thought I have about the Leela of Lord Ram, which is true of all Krishna's Leelas, is that the different characters in the Leelas are playing certain roles which are desired by the Lord in order to do two things: to teach lessons and in order to enact the Leela. And the Leelas are enacted for Krishna's pleasure, and as Krishna does many things simultaneously, they're also enacted to teach. And Ramayana teaches many things. And we have the example of Ravana, Kumbhakarna, who Ravana, as you know, or you may know, was in his former Leela Hiranyakashipu. And as Hiranyakashipu, he was a very angry, powerful, and domineering and asuric person, demoniac. Ravana was also the same. Ravana got benedictions that he wouldn't be killed by any mortal beings. He didn't think anyone is capable of defeating him. He wouldn't accept any good advice. Very, very similar to Hiranyakashipu, in all ways pretty much identical. Although I don't know if it was the goal of Ravana to control the universe as it was with Hiranyakashipu. But the general mentality was there. So, in ordinary drama, you hire an actor, and then as a director, you help the actor portray the part. And the actor tries to understand the role. And then the actor tries to live that person or become that person. So let's say you were going to play the role of Ravana. So you'd have to get into the bhav, the emotion, the mentality, the nature, the attitude of what it would mean to be Ravana. You'd have to just adopt that mood. And so you could portray him as realistically as possible. You'd say you'd have to become an incarnate of Ravana, or you would have to allow Ravana Shakti to empower you, and then as an actor, you could play that role, because that's the way actors best portray roles, is by becoming the person they're portraying, getting to know that person, and then becoming that person, and then when they become that person, they naturally don't even have to do anything other than act naturally, because now they are that person. So how does it work in Krishna Leela? Well, if we take this example, the example of Ravana. Well, Ravana, as you know, is Jai, the gatekeeper Jai. And so now the gatekeeper Jai has agreed or volunteered to become an asura in the Leelas of the Lord and play this very demoniac role. Now, he doesn't have to, he's not someone else who, in this sense, okay, in this sense you can say he is someone else who's become Ravana in order to play that Leela. But in this pastime, although even that's true, he is Ravana. He's not anybody else. So Krishna has fully empowered him with this demoniac spirit and nature and given him this tremendous power and mystic abilities in order to play the role. So Krishna is the director of the Leela, and rather than directing people how to play the role, Krishna just makes that person the person he wants to specifically be in order to fulfill that role. So he makes Ravana a particular way because Ravana has to fulfill a particular role. So Ravana is not at all conscious that he's Jai or he was Hiranyakashipu. He only knows that he's Ravana because Krishna, through his Yoga Maya potency, is directing the Leela, and as the ultimate director, Krishna doesn't have to instruct people how to act. He just makes them become that person. They take birth as the person that he wants them to act. Now, if you were a director and you could do that, if you could, okay, I want you to be this person, and then just make your actor that person, you would be quite a director, isn't it? That's what Krishna's doing. So everyone, these leelas are like movies, but they're actually happening. But they're like movies in the sense that Krishna has empowered everyone with the characteristics and attitudes necessary for them to play the part. So, now this may sound strange, but I like Ravana. Well, I actually don't like him, but I like him in the sense that there's much to learn from Ravana. And as you may know, or as if you don't know, this is wisdom for you. If someone acts in the wrong way, in a bad way, there's much to learn from them. And what do you learn? Well, you learn what not to do. So in the same way, Ravana teaches us what not to do. Sometimes you may have seen someone doing something wrong, and you made a note in your mind that I never want to do that, because that I can see the effect of this person's action on me or on others, and I never want to do that. So indirectly, I'm learning from the wrong actions of another. So in the Bhagavatam, in Ramayana, in Mahabharata, there are so many personalities who do wrong things. Even later they do right things, but there are some personalities who only do wrong things. And why does a Bhagavatam, which is meant to be a glorification of Krishna, have actions of persons who are doing bad things, who are doing wrong things? Because they're meant to be instructive. So Bhagavatam is full of both devotees who do proper actions, but also devotees who do improper actions. And not devotees, people who do improper actions. So that's why I say that Ravana is one of my favorite characters, because he personifies so many of the wrong things, or perhaps you could say personifies everything wrong, which we may have a tendency, okay, let's restate that. He personifies everything wrong, many of those tendencies which we have, which we can learn by seeing Ravana, because sometimes it's difficult to see these things in ourselves. I was just listening to some research about this, and it said that for us to know what's wrong with ourselves is extremely difficult. It may take us our whole life to acknowledge problems we have, whereas others, they can see them very quickly. So, in any case, when we see the actions of Ravana, then we can ask ourselves, well, do I have any of those tendencies? So let's study a little bit about Ravana, and let's see what we can learn from my favorite character in Mahabharata. Now, Ramayana. One of the things that we can learn from our good friend Ravana is what we learn from many, many of the demoniac kings that show up in our scriptures. These demoniac kings, they have Vedic knowledge. They may have many good qualities. It is said that Ravana was an expert musician. He played the veena. He was an expert manager. He was very intelligent and so forth. So it's not that Ravana was all bad. But the problem is that when they have good qualities, they're housed within a being who by nature is bad, who is evil. So because of that, Ravana was told by Vibhishan, and I believe he was told by many, he was told by at least Vibhishan, for sure Vibhishan, his brother, and Manodhari, his wife, that he should not take Sita, and once he kidnapped Sita, he should give her back. And as I understand, there's many versions of Ramayana, that's the problem. So there's some different takes on stories, but as I remember, all his ministers advised him, this is going to destroy our kingdom, do not fight Ravana, give back Sita, and he didn't listen because he wanted her more than anything. And so you see this theme coming up in scripture. Krishna went to Duryodhana and said, just give the Pandavas some land. They're kings, give them some land that they can rule over. And Duryodhana said no, and Krishna said, if you don't, there's going to be a fight, and many lives will be lost. And Duryodhana would not listen to Krishna. He was given advice by others. Vidura, as I remember, Vidura tried to speak to him. He couldn't listen. Vidura tried to speak to Dhritarashtra, give him the same message, tell your son not to fight. I can't tell him not to fight, he wants to fight. Also, Dhritarashtra was given good advice. He should renounce his kingdom. He's lost his sons, he's getting old. Difficult for him. And so this theme comes up. Even Dhruva Maharaj was given good advice, and he said to Narada, I know your advice is good, but I can't follow it. So this is a problem that many, many of us have. We get attached to an idea, and it's not a good idea, and we'll get good advice. You should not do this. And if we're attached to that idea, what happens? We can't listen. It's like we have blinders, and all we can see is this. You find that anytime you get too attached to having something or doing something, then you can't listen to good advice. And sometimes it may even be like the situation with Dhruva, where he says, I know your advice is good, unfortunately I can't follow it. And that's painful. With Ravana, he got good advice, but he didn't acknowledge it was good advice. He just said, no, I want Sita. I'm going to get Sita. That was his ambition. In other cases, I think often for us, we get good advice, we just don't want it, and we know it's good advice. Yeah, I wish I could follow what you said, but I can't. Then we're kind of caught up in a paradox. And that can be painful. But often, when we become very attached to something, then even though the advice is good, we can't even recognize that it's good advice. In fact, we don't want advice. In fact, Ravana actually didn't want anyone's advice. Ravana was the king. He wanted everyone to do what he said. So it was difficult for him. So that is a demoniac quality. You can give yourself a grade on a 0 to 10, how much you have it or don't have it. And you can consider how to deal with it. So in terms of getting advice, and not being able to take it, how do you rate on that? No, excuse me. And so in terms of getting good advice and being able to take it, how do you rate? So 10 would be, yes, I always take good advice. 1 would be, I never take good advice. I can't take good advice. But specifically, in this situation, we're saying, when you want to do something, you're attached to doing it, and you're given advice that it's not a good idea. Can you listen to that advice? It's obviously we can all listen to good advice where we're not attached to a particular outcome. But can you listen to good advice when you're attached to a particular outcome? Now, one of the things that we see is the more you're attached to doing something or thinking in a certain way or achieving something, the more difficult it is to listen to good advice. We see that oftentimes with young couples who fall in love. And it doesn't look like it's a good combination, at least to others. It doesn't look like they're going to make it. It doesn't look like they're well suited for various reasons. But they're madly in love, which is literally true, madly in love. And they're so madly in love that when they're told that this is not a good combination, the reasons are given, it's logical, it's practical. They can't listen, they don't want to listen. So when we don't want to listen, then we cannot listen to any good advice. And therefore, Chanakya Pandit said, if you give a fool good advice, he just becomes angry. So the problem really with Ravana was, obviously Ravana didn't want the advice that you should give Sita back to Rama. He was told, just apologize. You made a mistake. Give her back. No, he didn't want that advice. He wasn't having a meeting asking, what do you think we should... Ravana didn't have a meeting asking, well, what do you think we should do? Should I give Sita back? Should I keep Sita? Ravana didn't ask anyone, but he was given that advice. And whenever we are given advice we didn't ask for, it can be difficult to accept. And sometimes we'll say, thank you for your advice, but no thank you. I don't want your advice. Why don't I want your advice? Because I'm attached to doing something or having something. And I don't want anybody raining on my parade by telling me you shouldn't do this. So that's the danger with becoming too attached to something. As we know, and as Krishna says in the Gita, when we become too attached, we lose our intelligence. And intelligence is our greatest ally in becoming Krishna conscious, because it's by intelligence that we overcome all the contaminations of all the attachments and the inability to control our mind and emotions. It's intelligence that helps us control it. So if we lose intelligence, then we can't listen to good advice, and then we're going to do something stupid. And it's always intelligence that gives us clarity. Just like sometimes you might be disturbed mentally or centrally or emotionally, and then you go to class and you hear philosophy, you hear what is right, you hear what is wrong. And then you calm down, you get clarity. Oh, I was thinking this way, but that's the wrong way of thinking, isn't it? You have that experience? And you come out and say, oh, now I'm very clear. But when you came into class, or maybe it was coming into a counseling session or a discussion, you may have been very attached to thinking or acting in a particular way. But by hearing, your intelligence became purified. It clarified the issue, and that detached you. So extreme attachment generally will be symptomatic of a loss of intelligence, especially we're talking about attachment which is destructive. Obviously, if we're attached to something in Krishna consciousness, no problem. But if we're attached to something that's destructive, it's generally caused by intelligence fading or not functioning or being lost. So it's a very dangerous position for us. So we never want to allow ourselves to get in a situation where where our intelligence is not able to function well. And one of the ways the intelligence doesn't function well, as I said, is we don't hear sufficient. We're not reading, or we're not hearing enough philosophy, and so we're understanding things through the filter of our mind and through the filter of our emotions, which is, unless you're very Krishna conscious, that can be very dangerous, to understand things through the filter of our minds and senses and emotions, because the mind, senses, and emotions are conditioned to see everything in terms of sense gratification. So we may come up with all kinds of ideas and understandings and realizations, which are all based around something that's not even true, because we're filtering it through our mental, sensual, or emotional system, as opposed to filtering it through our intellectual system. So that's the importance of hearing, and also associating with devotees, because when you associate, you hear. So you get clarity. You may be unclear about something, you may be bewildered by something, but all the other devotees aren't. And so by being with those other devotees, you get clarity. So now you have someone like Ravana. He's in a dangerous situation because he doesn't want to listen to anybody. He may even take advice. In other words, what do you think? But he's not in the mood to listen to anything that doesn't align with what he wants to achieve. So he only wants to hear what people can tell him that would support him in his action of getting Sita and keeping Sita. Isn't it? So if we're in a position where we get very attached to something, and then we see that the only advice that we're able to hear is advice which is enabling us to achieve what we're attached to, considering that what we're attached to is not healthy, or the possibility that it's not healthy, and we can't listen to any advice, that means we've become too attached to something, and our intelligence is unable to function well. So that's what we learn from Ravana and the other demons like Duryodhana. We learned that from Dhruva. We learned that from Dhritarashtra. Who else did we learn? Can someone say who else we learned it from? Someone who could not take good advice, was given good advice, but couldn't take it. Anyone can say? You have any stories you can think of? Even outside of Bhagavatam, outside of our Shastra, any stories or any experiences you have, or any fairy tales, how good advice was given, a person didn't take it. I can't, my brain is not serving me well right now. I know there are many examples, I just can't think of any. So I'm depending on you. If you can think of some example. Good advice is given, a person's attached, they don't want the advice, they don't listen to it, they become angry when they're given good advice. Oh yeah, of course, Hiranyakashipu. Hiranyakashipu was given good advice by his son, Prahlad. Do you know what Prahlad told his father? His father said, "What did you learn in school?" "Well, it's the best thing." And he said, "As far as I can tell, you should step off the throne and go to the forest and renounce. Otherwise, you remain king, it's just going to be a problem." Think his father was happy to hear that? Bhishma Dev? What? The advice to get married? I don't know. What was Bhishma Dev? Anyway, we know this is a common problem. So this is one thing we learn from our good friend Ravana. He's taught us that listen to good advice and be careful about what you get attached to. And it's like in the world today, one very sad reality in the world today is that there is a lot of knowledge available about how to achieve different things, how to set goals and achieve them. But the problem is you may be setting and achieving goals which are unhealthy. Oh, Bhishma Dev advised not to support the Kauravas. Okay. Well, anyway, that was a different situation because he was obliged to support Duryodhana. It wasn't really he was attached to it, he was obliged. But, yeah. What was I just saying? I got sidetracked by your messages. I forgot. I was on a roll, and I rolled off the roll. And now I forgot. Somebody tell me, what was I saying before we were talking about Bhishma Dev? Oh, we were talking about Hiranyakashipu? Was that it? Yudhisthira not to play dice. Yeah, Yudhisthira was very attached to gambling. Prahlad told Hiranyakashipu, go to the forest. He wasn't happy to hear that. Yeah. So, but Yudhisthira, yeah. Okay. So, the main thing is, oh yeah, I was saying how you get, these people inspire you to achieve your goals, but, your goals may be the wrong goals. So just achieving goals in itself, unhealthy goals. So achieving goals in itself is no great thing if they're not the right goals. So, yeah. So we have a question about this point. If we see that someone, including a devotee, is doing something wrong, and we want to help, and we know that it will put him or her into troubles, but we know this person will not accept our advice. Should we give advice anyway, or let that person make their mistakes? I have this dilemma. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati once said, you can't help anybody. Oh. Don't think that you can help anybody. Let Krishna do it. Yeah, I think it's, I don't know if I told you this, but I heard that one of our godbrothers who's a guru said that the greatest pain he has is to know how to help a disciple and also know that the disciple can't listen to them. Yeah, so sometimes we have to suffer in detachment by not giving the advice that would help someone and watching that person suffer, and that may be the only way we can help them. It's interesting that Bhaktisiddhanta said that. I don't know the context, but it sounds like it's in a context where one is thinking that they're a great preacher and they can actually help people. And ultimately, it's Krishna from within the heart that's going to help anyone. So, if you follow Chanaka's advice, if you give good advice to a fool, they'll become angry, then temporarily, the person, if you understand temporarily this person doesn't want your advice, then they're now kind of in that same category. They'll just get upset, and they may get upset anyway. So, sometimes we have to be detached. And it's just a reality of life that sometimes you can't help somebody. Sometimes Prabhupada would hear about the actions of a disciple and they were disobeying him, and he would say, what can I do? If they don't listen, what can I do? That wasn't his attitude in the beginning of the movement. But I saw that attitude change when he realized that some people who become disciples will later on not follow, or even the ones who remain disciples may not follow perfectly. He became very detached. He said, my job is to give knowledge. Your job is to follow it. If you can't follow it, what can I do? So he detached from what I saw. So there has to be some detachment. For sure. prayer, you can pray. And if someone, I have seen personally, even in the position of guru with a disciple, that there have been times when a disciple did not want any advice. And I was unfortunately not smart enough to see that, because I didn't expect that a disciple wouldn't want advice from their guru. But in this particular situation, the disciple wanted me to agree with what this, I won't say he or she, what this disciple was saying. This disciple wanted me to agree, because this disciple had a certain understanding of the situation, and I did not agree with her understanding. I felt she had the wrong understanding, and I was trying to explain the right understanding, but she didn't want that understanding, and it made her feel very bad that I didn't agree with her. So, whoops, I said she. Well, I didn't say who the she was. So she is still protected. So she didn't want to hear what I had to, and everybody's thinking, who is it? They're going down my disciple list. Is it her or her? No, it's not who you think it is. And she wanted a certain answer, which was for me to sympathize with her situation, which maybe I should have sympathized more with it, because she was having a problem. But the way she was looking at the problem was not, I didn't believe it was in line with what was happening or with our philosophy. But she didn't want to hear that, and it became a big problem for her. Isn't that interesting? That sometimes even a disciple may find it extremely difficult to hear from their guru if the disciples become attached to something. In this case, she wasn't attached to something, she was just attached to thinking of a situation in a particular way. And unfortunately, the way she was thinking of the situation was disturbing her. So I was trying to help her see it in a more philosophical way and take more responsibility for the situation and what her role in the situation. But she didn't want to take that kind of responsibility. She wanted to blame somebody. That was really interesting, and it became a big problem. And, you probably don't want to get in an argument with your guru about who's right. I would not advise that. But anyway, it makes the point that this could even happen in a guru-disciple relationship if we're attached, in this case, which is so interesting, not even attached to anything material, achieving anything material, but attached to thinking of something in a specific way. Isn't that interesting? Isn't it? Yeah. Why would you want to give advice to someone who doesn't trust us or doesn't even want it? Even parents sometimes, not even parents many times will not be able to give advice to their children, and the children are going to have to make mistakes. That's a certain kind of parenting style, where you allow them to make mistakes. You know they're going to make mistakes, you know there's going to be a problem, and you allow it to happen because you can't teach them. They won't listen. So even Prabhupada was in that position where, as I said, he would say, what can I do? If they don't listen, what can I do? Even Prabhupada was in a situation where a foolish disciple was even instructing him. No, Prabhupada, this is wrong. You don't understand. It's like this. Actually, it happened more than once. And so, yes, these things happen. Yeah. Sometimes if we are just more experienced in some area of life and we made mistakes and we want to save others to have to make them the same mistakes, yeah, of course. Of course. But sometimes you have to be detached enough to know that another person may only be able to learn by making those mistakes. So you have to let them make them. It's just, that's the detachment that a counselor or a teacher or a guru or a mentor has to have. That sometimes the only way a person's going to learn is to make the mistake. And this is just a universal phenomena which we have to accept. It's just the way it is. And if it's that way for a guru, if it's that way for a parent, what to speak of just with friends who aren't even, a guru or a parent is supposed to guide you. Friends are not, contractually hired to guide you, unless they ask for it. In empathic listening, we learn to listen without giving advice. That often can really help someone. And that's also difficult sometimes. Sometimes advice is not well taken, and people just want you to listen. And I know that's difficult to do, especially if you're listening to them and they're not coming up with the right answer. But it's something we have to do. And I can speak from experience that it's difficult, because sometimes I advise people when later I realize that advice didn't help them. They weren't ready for it. I should have just listened. This happened recently. I can't remember the situation. Happened recently to me. Yeah, where it wasn't a big thing, but a person was coming to me and telling me about some problems. And he was coming on the plea of wanting advice, so I was giving it, but later I realized he just wanted to talk. He didn't want the advice. In my work, I'm just a tiny part of someone's life, planting seeds knowing I may never see the results, letting go, trusting, and getting my ego out of it, yeah. Detachment is one of the most valuable attitudes, or you could call it a tool, because detachment is what protects us against what we would want to control that we can't. And sometimes in certain situations, you reach a certain point and you realize if you go further, it's going to get very ugly. So you just detach and say, I have to let this go the way it's going, because at this point I've done everything to try to prevent the damage or the disaster, and I can't. And you just, or maybe sometimes in the beginning you haven't even tried and you realize there's nothing you can do. So detachment is, aside from being a tool necessary for Krishna consciousness, it's also invaluable in just allowing us to be peaceful. Like Krishna's telling Arjuna, don't be happy, don't be sad, don't be attached to victory or defeat. That sometimes the only way to make it through a situation without going crazy is to be detached. So that's always been my philosophy. I think I even had that philosophy before I was a devotee. I could just understand that there were so many things happening in my life that I had absolutely no control of. Both good and, I was seeing both good and bad. And I just started to become a bit detached, just to cope with it all. The truth is that it's very common nowadays. If Guru says something disciple doesn't like, disciple's rejecting your Guru. Yeah, well, it's better you do it before you take initiation than after. And it's actually a fault of a guru. I mean, this is a subtle thing. It's actually a fault of a guru to not tell the disciple what's true. But at the same time, we see with Prabhupada, if he felt that telling the disciple what was true in some cases may cause the disciple to do something wrong, he wouldn't tell them. So in Kali Yuga, Guru's position sometimes is a bit compromised because As this godbrother said, you know what to tell them, but you know they won't hear it, and so you can't tell them. And then again, you hope they will learn it sooner or later. And this is just common. Yeah, you know, a guru or a parent can, or a wise friend can save you lots of trouble if you listen to them. But they may not listen, and after they go through the trouble, all you can tell yourself is, yeah, I knew that would happen, but hopefully they've learned. Now, if some people have trouble, just in general, taking advice from others, they have trouble, you know, with authorities and so forth. So, if you want to take initiation and you have trouble with authorities, that's a little awkward. We take shelter of Prabhupada, we read his books, and until you accept a guru and then eventually take initiation, you're reading Prabhupada's books, you're considering, oh, Prabhupada said this, but I'm not really ready to follow that. Okay, you're not ready, that's realistic. But if you have a guru and the guru says, I need you to do this, it's more difficult to say I'm not ready, or I don't want to, or I can't. Whereas before initiation, you can just say, it's easier to say I'm not ready for that. And it's easier for the guru to say, okay. But you know when you want to take initiation, then you're going to need to be ready to be able to do certain things. Okay. So, therefore, devotees should consider, you know, if they have difficulty following certain instructions, or they get attached to their own ways of thinking or doing things and so forth, maybe getting initiated at that point is not a good idea, and maybe they need to work on those things so that when they get initiated, they'll be able to follow. As I said, of course, the guru, understanding the nature of disciple, will adjust instructions generally to not make it too difficult for the disciple to follow. But as Prabhupada said, he was given an instruction by his spiritual master to spread Krishna consciousness in the West, and Prabhupada thought that instruction was impossible to follow. Of course, Prabhupada tried to follow it, but that's sometimes the nature of the guru-disciple relationship, that you get an instruction that you feel is impossible to follow. And your guru knows if you follow it, it'll be the best thing for you, and it'll be the best thing for other people. So he gives it to you. And so as a disciple, you want to be in a mood where you can say, okay, I don't think I can do this, or I don't understand how or why to do it, but my guru has asked me to do it, so I will do it. That's ideal. Not everybody can be that ideal of a disciple, but at least we have to be open as far as possible to the instructions of the guru. And you could say, Guru Maharaj, I don't know if I can follow this, or I don't know how to follow this, or I don't understand this, and discuss it with him. But disagreeing, that's okay before you're a disciple. You're checking out the guru. He said this, I don't know if I can do this, I don't even know if that's correct. But after accepting initiation, then things change. And so Prabhupada he's talked about that. He's made concessions. He said, okay, if you're not initiated, then this, that, and the next thing is okay. But after you're initiated, then it's like a contract. There's certain things that you must do. So Prabhupada, you could say, I will say, this is my observation, that prior to initiation, there was leniency. But after initiation, he was more strict with people. No, there's a relationship here and you're committed. So, we look at initiation and we think, well, some people think, well, if I get initiated, then everything is just going to get better. No, getting initiated means you have to become better. It's not like it just gets better. No, initiated means you have to become better now. You're taking things more seriously. Prior to initiation, you're looking at everything, you're seeing how you fit in, you're seeing what you can do and what you can't do. So after initiation, there's a certain standard of what you have to do. Before initiation, you don't have to come to that standard. You come in your own time. And after initiation, you're agreeing to come to the standard because you want to come to this standard. It's like any commitment we make is because we want to make it. Not because we have to make it necessarily, but we want to make it, so we do it. Or you decide to go on a diet or exercise, or you decide because you want to do that. And so before you go on the diet, yeah, you eat whatever. But after you go on the diet, okay, everything changes. So you want to make sure, you're ready for the diet. So it's a bit like that with guru disciple. Yes? Yes. But it's not that you just get a guru and everything's downhill from there and you don't have to do anything. No. It's when you take initiation. Before initiation, as we were saying, you work up to this. At initiation, it means, okay, I'm making some commitments. There's some standard, some standard which some people might call fanaticism to some degree. But I don't see it as fanaticism. I just see it as a commitment. That there's a relationship. This person's your teacher. This person's your guide. Why do you have a teacher or a guide if you don't want to hear from them? It's just common sense. And it's said, Bhaktivinoda Thakur said, well, you live with your guru. Of course, that's not possible now, but the idea is you live with your guru to make sure this is the person that I can follow, this is the person I want to follow, to make sure that this person is actually bona fide and so forth. So that's fine. When one's aspiring, one can have these doubts and questions and, Guru Maharaj did this, I'm confused, why did he do that? In my understanding, that's not a Krishna conscious thing to do. These things are there. After, and you're questioning, why, and you said this, but Prabhupada said that, and I don't understand. That happens less after you're initiated. It's not, you're not so much in judgment mode. Maybe I'm wrong, but I notice that gurus are a bit afraid to say to the disciples what's wrong with them because they're afraid that they will have psychological breakdown and will leave Krishna consciousness. Yeah. The difficulty being a guru these days. That's a consideration. In Vedic times, gurus used to be very heavy, the disciples. Should we ask our guru to be totally honest with us and what's wrong with us? That's not a bad idea. We may be afraid to do it because the truth might be difficult to digest for us. The fact is you already know what's wrong with you. So if you're afraid to ask him, you're probably afraid to ask yourself. So yeah, it's not, being a disciple is not the easiest thing. I think one of the most difficult things in being a disciple is exactly what we're discussing in relation to Ravana, that the guru is going to say, don't do this, and the thing he's saying don't do, you might be attached to doing. That's like one of our godbrothers, the late Gamagemya Prabhu, he studied filmmaking, and every time he asked Prabhupada if he could make a film, Prabhupada would say no. And he'd come back and say, can I make films? Prabhupada said, other people are already making films, you don't need to do it. And he could never get a yes, and then one Prabhupada said, just, who's stopping you if you want to make a film? But initially, Prabhupada didn't want him to do it. I think there was another devotee who was, I heard a story recently, he wanted to play guitar, I don't know, play guitar in kirtan or what, and Prabhupada didn't want him to. So it's like, these things, it's difficult to become a disciple because there may be something that you really want to do that your guru says, no, it's not good for you, don't do it. And you have to be willing to accept that, and that's not always easy. Now, of course, you could discuss it with your guru, I really want to do this for these reasons, this and that. But ultimately, if he decides it wouldn't be good for you, then you have to, in theory, that's what it means to be a disciple. Disciple is not just you get a spiritual name, you become part of the family, and then it's like you're on a slide and everything's easy and you're going down, and your guru just pushed you onto the slide. It's not like that. It's having a guru It's the process, it's the recommendation, but you have to be ready for it. So if we're afraid to ask the Guru to tell us what's wrong with us, it's probably something we're resisting looking at that's wrong with us. Anyway, and probably you know what that is. Of course, you can ask him if you want. Guru might not say it because the disciple, he knows the disciple couldn't do it. Yes, he might not say it because he knows the disciple cannot accept it. But if he believes it's really important for that disciple, he might say it anyway. Because often when we don't accept something, at least we heard it, and if we're somewhat sincere devotees, even if we're rejecting it, we heard it, and then we start thinking about it later. My Guru Maharaj said this. I don't think that's right. How could he say this? But it got in, and you've heard it. So it's up to the Guru how they will instruct a disciple, and the Guru may also be light on the disciple and may later regret that he allowed the disciple to do something that he knew the disciple wanted to do, and he knew that they would not listen to him if he tried to deter them from doing that, and then they did it, and then he saw it created a problem, and now in retrospect he may look back and say, I should have not allowed that. But they were attached. In some cases, disciples will come after they've already done it and say, is it okay if I do this? Like after they're married, is it okay I marry this guy? Or you're already married. Or the marriage is next week. What is the Guru going to say? So often the Guru will not say, well, I've been in that situation where a couple's been attached. I don't want to say anything because I don't want to criticize the person she's attached to because that's going to hurt her. But I didn't think it was going to work. But it was very difficult to say that because they were already a couple. So it's like if you're already a couple and you come to your Guru and say, what do you think? It's like a little bit too late. You're supposed to say that in the beginning when you're thinking about it, not when you already are deciding to get married. You have to trust your Guru implicitly. We may not understand at that time. Bottom line is obey your Guru. This is the relationship between Guru and disciple, yeah. And Vijay Lakshmi is from the older generation of Indians, and that's their culture. They're committed. Now we have the younger generation. Younger generation is a little, I don't know what the word is, flimsy, whimsical, than the older generation. Older generation is like, you commit, it's over, it's finished. Younger generation. I just heard a joke. People get married for life. Right? So on your wedding day, you say, this is for life. And then you decide how many years life's going to be. So you later decide life is usually 6 years. That's I think, an average term for a marriage to last these days. Yeah, we were married for life for 6 years. That was life for us. Yeah, so things have changed. It's amazing how the minds of young people are so different from the minds of older people. They're like their brains were made in different factories, in different countries. They don't work the same way anymore. And now we're becoming devotees, and we require high levels of commitment and discipline. And so, it's challenging. Okay, so we only got one quality of Ravana. There's another interesting point. It's a philosophical point we can discuss. And that is that, the story, but Ravana had a plan to kidnap Sita, and the plan was Marichi would become a beautiful deer, attract Sita, then Sita would tell Ram to go get it, and then the deer would yell, Lakshman, save me, and then Sita would force Lakshman to leave, and then Ravana would come. And so she intimidated Lakshman in such a way that he had to leave, and he drew a circle around her, and if anyone tried to cross that circle, there would be fire. Ravana came. He said, I'm dressed as a sadhu, I'm hungry, please feed me. And she came up to the line. He couldn't walk over the line, he tried. She came to the line, he pulled her over the line. Now, what's interesting about this is that it is said that the Sita that Ravana captured was a Maya Sita, not the real Sita. I think you all know that the real Sita was taken by Agni, and then a Maya Sita, an external Sita, was actually captured by Ravana. So the real Sita was never touched by Ravana. And I was reading recently an interesting point. It said that Ravana could not see the real Sita. So when Ravana came and he asked Sita for fruit, that was the Maya Sita at that point, because he wasn't qualified to see the real Sita. So it's often explained, well, he wasn't qualified to touch the real Sita. He wasn't qualified because only Ram is Sita's wife. So obviously no one else is qualified to be with her, to touch her, to love her, and so forth. But this gives us a little more insight philosophically that he was not even qualified to see her because she's transcendental and purely spiritual. So what he was seeing was a Maya Sita. And so I was thinking, this is very interesting, just like there's a verse, Arche Vishnu Shliladir, that you might see the deity as stone, or if you see the deity as stone, you have a hellish mind. There's other things. Guru Shu Nara Material, you see the Guru as an ordinary person, Vaishnava Jati Vaishnava Jatir Bhuti, you see a Vaishnava according to the caste he was born in, not that he's transcendental to the four castes, but you see him according to his birth. Then you're possessed of Naraki, a mentality that's hellish. And so I think we've all had experience of this as young devotees. We go in a temple, we see the deity, or even as more mature devotees, if we're not in Krishna consciousness, we see the deity, but sometimes we don't feel anything. So obviously when we chant, sometimes we don't feel anything. So the same thing is being displayed here in Ravana. He's not seeing the spiritual form of Sita because he doesn't have spiritual eyes, he's not qualified. And so he's seeing this form, and this form is just arousing lust. The spiritual form of Sita would not arouse lust. So you have the same thing like in the Leelas of Krishna and the Gopis, which are the highest. This doesn't get any higher than that. Of course, Radharani's in separation is the highest. So it doesn't get any higher than these pastimes, meeting and separation of the Gopis, meeting and separation of Radha. This is the highest thing. And if you understand this, it transports you to this amazingly transcendental place in your Krishna consciousness. But if you don't understand it, then you see it materially, and then it can actually arouse lust, which is interesting, isn't it? That the Leela, which can purify the lust, because it is so transcendental, so high, it is so dripping with prema, that if you enter that Leela, some understanding of it and ability to relish it, you experience so much ecstasy and pleasure and realization and sweetness that you'll just transcend this world. But if you see it materially, it will arouse your lust. So obviously when Ravana saw Sita, he didn't become purified. He said, "Oh, Sita, you're so beautiful. You're the goddess of fortune," and bowed down. And no, he wanted to enjoy that beauty, so he wasn't seeing Sita. So if you want to enjoy the holy name, that's not the holy name. If you want to enjoy anything in Krishna consciousness, then it's no longer that thing that you thought it was. It's just material. And rather than it purifying you, it can arouse material qualities within you. Isn't that interesting? So this example of Ravana I like it so much because it's speaking to us. Well, do you see the holy name as Krishna? I just read this thing that Prabhupada said. It's amazing. Prabhupada was often asked about thinking of Krishna when you chant. And Prabhupada would say, if it's unnatural, no. But if it's natural, yes, and it will be natural. In this answer to this question, Prabhupada said, by chanting Hare Krishna properly, you will see Krishna. You will see Krishna's form when you chant properly. Think about that. Krishna is there in his name. We will see Krishna's form when we chant, but we're so covered, we don't see it. But it will, one day we will see it. So ever since I heard that, every time I chant, I think, okay, maybe this next mantra, I will see Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Because Krishna is there in his name. Krishna is there in his name. Maybe this next mantra is going to be the one. It's a beautiful meditation. But that being the fact, just imagine those days you're chanting when you're just totally bored or you fall asleep. So what's actually happening? It's almost like a false mantra, like we say, a false Sita, not the real Sita. It's a false mantra. You see the deity. It's like a false deity. It's not. You're not seeing Krishna. You're seeing stone. You're not seeing Shabda Brahman. You're just hearing an ordinary sound. We just had I was just in Perth, Australia, and we did a 2-day japa workshop. And I was joking with the devotees, and I was saying, are you chanting Hare Krishna or are you chanting Coca-Cola? And what I meant was that is the experience you're having with your japa similar to the experience you would have if you were chanting Coca-Cola? It's true. I think we can all relate to this. Yeah, sometimes I think my experience with chanting Hare Krishna is not a whole lot different than my experience with chanting Coca-Cola. Why? Because it then becomes a false Krishna. That's not the real Krishna. We have to be spiritual, we have to be pure to touch the real Krishna. Ravana could not touch Sita, he couldn't even see her. There's no, Atasi Krishna Nabani Nababed Graim Indriya, that famous verse that you can't touch Krishna with gross material senses. You're not able to experience Krishna with material eyes, material tongue, material ears, and so forth. So we learn that from Ravana, and now you can remember Ravana when you're chanting japa. And think, am I chanting a false? Is it like a false Sita? Am I trying to steal away a false Krishna? It's not the real Krishna. So, I was telling, where did we go? I was with my family this weekend. We went, oh yeah, this was really funny. I want to tell this story. It relates to this. So, in the Shastra, you find, especially in Chaitanya Charitamrita, when Lord Chaitanya is relishing Krishna consciousness with his associates, you find that they evaluate the quality of the hearing, the chanting, the relation, whatever, in terms of how much ecstasy it produces. So sometimes we'll say that was an ecstatic class or an ecstatic kirtan or ecstatic prasadam because we feel ecstasy from it. Or it's an ecstatic verse. I heard a verse and I felt ecstasy. And I was saying, last few weeks I've been pointing out that when Thakur Haridas heard a verse, he became so ecstatic he got up and started dancing just by hearing a verse. So that's the nature of Krishna consciousness. When you're actually accessing the spiritual nature of something, you experience ecstasy. And the more bhakti the kirtaniya has, and the more bhakti the devotees have, the more you experience the bhakti and the ecstasy, and the more bhakti in the prasadam, and the more devotion and scholarship and realization in the class, the more you experience it. So we can we can evaluate everything on what I say on the ecstasy meter. Well, how much ecstasy was in that kirtan? Put the meter across. How much ecstasy was in that class? How much ecstasy was in this sangha? How much ecstasy was in this festival? We were all recently in Mayapur. How much ecstasy was in that? Was being in Mayapur? Wow, the meter was hitting the red. Bing, bing, bing. It was so high. So that's how you evaluate ecstasy. So it was my daughter's birthday, and we were taking her to different places, and we were near a museum, and my mother-in-law had a pass for the museum. It's like a modern art museum. And she wanted to take us there because her relatives have an exhibition. She said, why don't we go to this museum? She has very wealthy relatives, and they have an exhibition. They put their art in there. And so there was all this modern art. And a lot of, this is serious, you won't believe it. One modern art was a pedestal made of cement. It was just a pedestal about 6 feet high, made of cement, and it had a surface on the top, which was kind of rough. Maybe that was supposed to be artistic. And it had a fire hose on it. That was an exhibit. Serious. This is a very high-end museum. That was one of the exhibits. That was art. And they had I don't know if you've ever seen these, but they're like little compartments, like this size. 1, 2, 3, 4, like you would put mail in an office. So they had a compartment. It had 1, 2, 3. It had 8 compartments or 10, like this size. Right? Little rectangle. And each one was painted a different color, and it was screwed onto the wall. And that was a work of art. Yes. Yes. I'm not making this up. There's so many other things like that. But then there was a painting, and it was an off-gray stripe, just very, very faded, and then a little, say off-white, then a faded gray stripe, and off-white and a faded gray. Just like someone put some tape and just painted, just very faded. And that was another, like $13,000 or $130,000 work of art like that. So when I walked out, I said, that was minus 108 on the ecstasy scale. It was like, you're used to looking at art of Krishna and Leela, and so we're looking at this other art, and it's like, blah. Go to the next one. Blah. Go to the next one. Well, they had some Renaissance paintings or Renaissance-like paintings, so that was, we could appreciate the artistic quality. But when I walked out, I was thinking, okay, well, how much ecstasy am I feeling now? The meter is on the negative. So our ability to experience ecstasy in Krishna consciousness is what keeps us going, and our ability to experience that ecstasy is our purity. And so if we're pure in the right consciousness, when we see the deities, when we hear the Bhagavatam, when we chant the holy name, then we won't have this Ravana factor. We can call this the Ravana factor. We won't have the Ravana factor play into this because we're accessing the transcendental nature of whatever it is we're doing. And then we get the ecstasy. And ecstasy is very important for all of you. Actually, our life as devotees is just cultivating ecstasy. That's what we're doing. Every day we're just churning this ocean with our chanting, with our kirtan, with our classes, with everything. We're just trying to churn the ocean of ecstasy. That's what we're doing. So Krishna Karshani says, powerful statement. If we want to enjoy anything in KC, it will not arise out of our material side. It's difficult to remove from the heart the tendency to be enjoyer, even as devotee still tendency to be strong. Even as devotee still. Yeah. So we have this beautiful painting of Ras Leela in the temple. I was in the temple this morning, chanting my rounds, and I was looking at this painting, meditating on it. And there's Krishna. Well, there's Krishna. I don't know if it's Ras Leela. There's Krishna with the main gopis. He's playing on his flute. They're enjoying, right? So, you think that's enjoyment? You like to be there? Yeah, you don't even have to be there. Because if we are pure, just by seeing that Leela, we can enjoy 1,000 million, trillion, quadrillion times more than you could ever enjoy if you had your own girlfriends or boyfriends, or if you had 4 boyfriends or 4 girlfriends. So we have to understand that the word enjoyment, when you juxtapose it against spiritual enjoyment, there is no such thing as enjoyment in this world. It's just, all it is you get some sensual stimulation which lasts for a few hours, and you eat, it's a great meal, and 3 or 4 hours later, what do you feel? Look at all these like older people, right? They've done so many things. They've had so many meals. They've had so much sex. They've had so much sense gratification, been all around the world, and now they're like 85, and look at them. Does it look like that sense gratification has like done anything for them? It's worn them out. Are they experiencing any of the happiness of the sense gratification they had, and with that very amazing relationship they had 25 years ago with this beautiful guy or beautiful girl? Of course not. It's gone. It was gone a few hours after they had that connection. You went to this amusement park, you rode on this roller coaster. Yeah, you can remember it, now you're 75 and you remember it 50 years earlier. What was the experience of that? It was practically nothing. But Krishna consciousness, you just think of Krishna Lila, boom, you're there. So we enjoy by facilitating Krishna's enjoyment and hearing about Krishna's enjoyment. That's how we enjoy. We just understand you were meant to enjoy that way. You were not meant to enjoy through your senses. It's not possible. You can't do it. It's not. It's just all you're getting is some sensual stimulus for a little short period of time. That's all it is. It doesn't really make you happy. It actually makes you unhappy. So, and if we don't develop the mentality that Krishna is the enjoyer, then when we see the deities, when we hear the holy name and so forth, hey Krishna, no, I don't like to chant. See the deities, yeah. The only beauty you see in the deities will be what they're wearing, but the actual beauty of Krishna and your relationship, maybe you won't get it. So sense gratification deprives us of being able to relish and churn the ocean of ecstasy that's in Krishna consciousness. That's the problem. So let's go further. Hare Krishna. Thank you, Anarpita Karuna. Thank you so much for throwing light on quality chanting. Give an example of Ravana. Yeah, as I said, he's my favorite character. Next to Lord Rama and Lakshmana and yes, I have experienced when I chant like Ravana, does this Srimati Sita is Maya form. Interesting, huh? Yeah, Maya, I got a Maya name. But when I do, I feel Ravana does see the, I chant like Ravana, I see the Maya form sometimes. I don't feel purified, but when I do with full concentration, I feel ecstasy and at peace in chanting the holy name. Yeah, so you have experience of what I'm saying. How we could recognize if we are in ecstasy or if it's only our imagination? Well, if it's ecstasy, it has to be, the stimulus has to be something transcendental. And the result has to be that you're becoming more attached to Krishna, and your experience is improving or sweetening. If you call something ecstasy, and after you have the ecstasy, you go to the bar, of course you wouldn't. You go smoke a cigarette, of course you wouldn't. But if your tendency, after the so-called ecstasy, if your tendency is to do something material, that was not ecstasy. If your tendency is to do more Krishna consciousness, then that was ecstasy. Wow. Radhika's in Vrindavan. I'm envious of you, Radhika. You're in Vrindavan. And I'm only in Alachua. Wow, how depressing for me. Oh, I'm so envious. Yeah, isn't envy crazy? Of course, Prabhupada said, if you want to be transcendentally envious, then let's all be transcendentally envious of Radhika, and let's all imagine we're in Vrindavan also. Yeah, ecstatic. I was actually there, Radhika, on the appearance day of Lord Rama in 1975. That's when the Krishna Balaram temple opened. And so I will meditate now on 1975. It was so hot. Srila Prabhupada was there, and there was an all-day ceremony installing the deities, and Prabhupada did the first artik, and there was hundreds of American brahmacharis. What a rare breed, American brahmacharis. Such a rare breed. They hardly exist anymore. But in those days, there were hundreds of full-blooded USA, bona fide American brahmachari, shaved head, saffron dhoti. Hundreds and hundreds were there. Vrindavan is a state of mind. So we're all going to Vrindavan in our mind now. Hare Krishna. Okay, so we'll see you tomorrow, and same time. And if I don't finish everything I want to talk about, then we'll keep classes going. Maybe every day we can talk about Ram. It's just nice to meditate. There's so much. I mean, I like philosophy, as you probably noticed. More. I mean, I like Leela, but my tendency is, I've always analyzed things. My tendency is to analyze. So, and Krishna has given so many lessons in the Ramayana that we can learn from. So, we'll continue to learn from it, and we'll see you tomorrow. And, yes. Hare Krishna to all of you. Oh, this is not even going to let me... I don't even know if I can turn you off now. Hare Krishna. Okay, I want to try to turn you off. If I can't turn you off, we're in trouble.